Mocha is the industry-leading planar tracker, but even the best sometimes need a little help. In those cases, you need very fine control over each and every aspect of your track, your shapes, or your camera solve. In today's quick tip, I'm going to show you how to refine your tracks using the Mocha Curve Editor. I'm Christoph Zapletal for Boris Effects. Let's jump right in. My first example is this time-lapse of a street sign. Overall, the track is not bad, but the time-lapse produces some micro jumps in our track. Your first instinct might be to deal with this in the Adjust Track module, but in a case like this, where we've got very short and erratic jumps, you could end up creating manual keyframes on every frame. That's not good practice. So let's jump over to the graph section of our interface. The dope sheet is fine if we want to fix timing issues, but if we want to view and modify the actual values, the Curve Editor is the place to go. On the left-hand side, we can see all the parameters that are available to us. Let's filter out anything not directly related to our street sign layer by activating the Selected checkbox. Every parameter branch that contains keyframe data will be indicated by a rhombus with a green outline. But we have to move further down the hierarchy to get to the parameters where the actual keyframes reside, shown by the filled green rhombuses. When I jump between scale, rotation, and skew, you can see that the keyframe curve will always fill up the entire graph, and that the scales here always adapt to show the range that these keyframes live in. That is because in my Zoom pull-down menu I've got Auto Zoom to Fit selected. But you can lasso select a range of keyframes and then choose Zoom to Selected to inspect a particular area more closely. And of course, the traditional controls you know and love from the viewport also work in the graph editor. You can zoom in and out with your mouse scroll wheel, and holding down the middle mouse button will allow you to pan. And if you are zoomed in close enough, these scroll bars will appear as well and allow you to do this even more granular. On the right-hand side, we've got this slider to adjust the size of the individual keyframes in the graph. Depending on the scope of data you're viewing or modifying, you might want these larger or smaller. So how can we use the Curve Editor to refine our track? First of all, the spikes in the graphs give us a great indication of where things might jump or get off track. Take a look here. I select all my parameters and frame up all of these curves. Most of them are jumping, but it is really just for a short amount of time. Once I identify the problematic area, I can pick the individual parameters and modify them directly in the Curve Editor. Be aware that I'm thereby modifying the raw tracking data, so this can be destructive. But the good thing is that I always have a live update in the viewer to see what is actually happening to my track. Of course, I can use this on every parameter inside of Mocha that is keyframeable, but in this case, it is a really controlled way of modifying the raw tracking data. But does this mean I can just forget about the Adjust Track module? Au contraire. Take a look at this shot of a smartphone screen. The track is 80% there, but we have got the typical planar drift we occasionally get with reflective surfaces that are also partially obscured. This is the perfect task for the Adjust Track module, but the Curve Editor will be there as well to help us along the way. In the Adjust Track module, I'm going to set up 4 points for a perspective adjust track. Now let's go to the Curve Editor and select the actual tracking data keyframes. Take a look at what happens when I move my adjust track points in the viewer. I get a little ghost curve for each of my tracking parameters. That way, I can quickly see how much influence the adjust track actually has on a certain value between frames. If I accidentally set too many keyframes, or my adjustments go too far, I can now see it at a glance and not only by shuttling through the clip. Oh, and if you want to have the on-screen controls of the Adjust Track module visible at the same time, that is no problem at all. Click here and you can turn this into a floating window. If you've got a second screen, you can move it over there, but for the benefit of this video, I'll dock it up here. Now I can use the nudge tools and still see my little ghost curve and compensate for the drift of my screen track. Let's take a look at our final example. I camera solved this shot of the Tokyo subway. The solve is good, but not great. The error curve already gives us an indication where things are not ideal. But if we really want to get to the bottom of this, we can open up the curve editor and open the translation and rotation values of our solved Mocha camera. That way, we can identify areas where our camera behaves a little bit jittery and see where we need to work on in the solve module. But if cleaning up features and refining doesn't get you there, you can use the curve editor to modify your camera move directly, either individually by modifying or deleting keyframes like we did in our first example, or by lasso selecting your problem area and smoothing out the curve. Be aware though that like with the tracking data, you are modifying the solved camera. So the changes you make here will not be represented in your average error here. And of course, if you do any resolving or refinement, all of your changes to the curve will be overwritten by the new solve. Still, in some cases it might be easier to delete just a couple of dead frames, rather than to resolve the entire shot. So there you have it. The curve editor really allows you to visualize all the data Mocha produces and nudge it in there until your track sits in there seamlessly. There's a lot more to explore inside of Mocha, so check out our other tutorials at boriseffects.com. My name is Christoph Zapletal for Boris Effects, and I will see you in another video.